let's cut right to the chase. Yakuza Like a Dragon is one of my favorite games of the last 5 years, and arguably one of my favorite games of the last 10 years. When so many developers within the industry were pushing towards questionable heroes performing questionable actions, the good people at Ryoga Gotoku Studios went another direction. They created characters that were likable and compassionate and cared about the people around them and wanted to see the community that they lived in thrive. That community, Injincho, is worth exploring. The side quests are just stories. They're just people living their lives, and we get to see how Kasuga and his group impact those lives. The combat is unremarkable, but serviceable. And while it's not the most interesting system, it does have a lot of flair, and that helps to elevate it to something that's slightly above average. And like any Yakuza game, there are a ton of things to do. Sub-stories, part-time hero, kart racing, business simulation, there's just a lot to take in. And because there's so much to take in, I don't want to take up any more time. So, enjoy the montage, and I'll see you on the other side.
Look at you. You got the audience to its feet and suddenly you think you're a star.
You can't earn for the family!
Looks like I shook him off.
Yakuza Like a Dragon revolves entirely around Ichiban Kasuga, and he starts out as sort of a delinquent teen who ends up getting in trouble with a local Yakuza gang. When this happens, he name drops Masami Arakawa, who is the patriarch of the Arakawa family. To Kasuga's surprise, Arakawa actually shows up and saves him. Because of this, Kasuga feels like he essentially has a life debt to Arakawa and begs to get into the Yakuza clan. Eventually, Arakawa relents and Kasuga is brought on board. Now, this is really important to Kasuga's character because not only does he have this life debt that he feels he owes everything to Arakawa and the family itself, but he essentially has really old Yakuza ideals. And as the game progresses, you'll see how important these ideals become to him, but also they're important because they're often at odds with modern Yakuza standards. So there's going to be clashes not only within Yakuza and Kasuga, but there'll be clashes with Kasuga and essentially any other gang that's not Yakuza related, just because he has this sense of honor and duty and loyalty to his family.
Yeah, and you're the king of them all.
The king? To me, all of you are more like sons than subjects.
Now, all of this comes to a head when he has a life-altering meeting with Arakawa. In this meeting, Arakawa asks Kasuga to take the fall for a murder of a rival clan's officer. Now, this is a huge deal because not only does it give Kasuga an opportunity to repay his debt to Arakawa, but it also is going to transform the story because Kasuga is essentially going to get removed from what's going on for 18 years. And the story picks back up when he gets out of prison. When he gets out of prison, Kasuga expects someone from the Arakawa family, if not Arakawa himself, to meet him and take him back into the fold. This doesn't happen. Instead, he finds a man named Koichi Adachi, who's an ex-detective. Now, Adachi warns Kasuga that things have drastically changed since he's been in prison, but being who he is, Kasuga basically ignores this and wants to go back to Kamurocho, the city where the story begins, to see it for himself.
Guess I never realized just how long 18 years really is.
That's not the Kamurocho you remember. I know that must be shitty.
Adachi decides to go with him for his own reasons, and not to reveal anything, but after they are done in Kamurocho, Kasuga ends up in a trash heap outside a homeless encampment in another city called Injincho.
Injincho?
Injincho. Isazaki Injincho. Yokohama. Don't you know Yokohama?
Injincho is where the majority of the game will take place and is the loom where all the stories will weave and intertwine. It is a city of hardworking people just trying to find their way in a world that honestly doesn't seem to really want them. You got homeless people who just want to be treated like people and not disposable garbage. You got immigrants who are just wanting to find a place in a new world. And you got businesses trying to make it in a society that doesn't like what they do. And so sometimes they have to resort to illegal means to make ends meet. In a nutshell, Injincho is a living, breathing testament to people who want to improve their lives and do something better for those around them, but find that they don't have the support or resources to do so, and so they take the matter into their own hands, whether those matters are legal or not. These stories throughout the city kind of form a gray area, and that's essentially what YLAD is about all the way down to its core. It's exploring these issues where there may not necessarily be a right or wrong way to look at it, or there may be a right way to look at it, but for whatever reason, the law or society's standards say, no, you can't do that. And as I mentioned earlier, Kasuga kind of blazes his own path through his life. So this whole backdrop of things being a gray area is perfect for someone like him.
You know how some things fall into the gray area? Neither black nor white? Like things that are technically illegal, but cops look the other way because they're victimless crimes. They don't like that. They want to crack down on all crime, whether it hurts someone or not. They want to bleach the gray so that it's white.
This town is just full of metaphors, huh?
Getting back to Kasuga, he's a man who wears his heart on his sleeve, and underneath his sleeve is bulging biceps ready to crush someone down. In my decades of playing video games, he is seriously one of my favorite protagonists. When he sees someone needs help, he does his best to offer that. And a big reason he does that is that same courtesy was extended to him at the beginning of the story by Masumi Arakawa. He doesn't really judge people based on things they've done in the past. So if you maybe did some horrible things, he's not going to hold that against you as long as you recognize that those things you did were not the best path, and right now you are trying to improve yourself as a person. If you're doing those things, Kasuga's got your back. That's not to say Kasuga doesn't have his own problems or make mistakes, and sometimes he doesn't recognize those mistakes, so those in his party step in to remind him of what he should be doing and what type of person he wants to become. And this kind of repeats itself over and over through the story of him trying to self-improve and those around him also trying to self-improve. He likes to look at what people are doing with their lives, what deeds they are doing now, rather than basing everything on whether things are black or white. Is it moral because everyone says it is, or is it legal because that's just how the books are set up? Are these things bad inherently, or are they bad simply because someone else is telling you they're bad, even though it's not really hurting anyone? This gray area approach to a lot of the situations and storylines within YLAD asks the question of, is it more important to be legally correct? Is it more important to be quote unquote morally bound by the majority? Or does it make more sense to let people kind of live their lives as long as no one else is being harmed? If the community within the gray area is taking care of itself and making sure people are better off than they were before, is that better than these outside forces coming in and saying, no, don't live that way? I'm not saying one way or the other, which is right and which is wrong, but this is the environment that Kasuga and his team are trying to navigate. And 99% of the time, Kasuga's gonna side with the underdog. He's gonna go against the majority who are trying to bully the smaller group. Sometimes that gets him in trouble. A lot of times it gets him in trouble, but other times it's pretty obvious that he's doing the right thing, even if other people may view that situation as, oh, that's beneath me, or what you're doing is illegal and wrong. Kasuga says, well, it may be that way, but these people still need help, and I'm still going to give them the help that they need.
You okay, young master? I'm fine.
So regardless of my own ramblings, YLAD's story overall is one of my favorite storylines that I've encountered in a video game. There are moments when I was truly enraged by what was happening. There were moments where I got choked up over, well, I won't spoil anything, but there were moments that definitely brought out some emotions in me and has some of the best villains to hate in a game in a long time. I certainly still think about the last 2 or 3 main beats of the storyline and wonder where Kasuga and his team are going to end up after this game. I really want to continue their story, and it kind of echoes a little bit of my review of Indivisible. And in that game, that ensemble cast was fantastic, and I really wish there was another game to explore these characters. And luckily for us, Yakuza is a very well-established series, so I don't see any reason we wouldn't see another Yakuza Like a Dragon game starring Kasuga and that team, but it still makes me think about what is going to happen from here, because not everything gets tied up, and that's the way it should be for a game like this, because if you wrap everything up, where are you going to go from there? Above all, the story was so good, it made me go out and buy each of the mainline games in the Yakuza series, as well as Judgment and Yakuza Dead Souls. So I'm definitely going to cover those on this channel at some point. I don't know when I will get around to them, but it's definitely on my radar that I want to explore all of these, because if they are anything like how this one is, I'm going to love it. But enough about Kasuga and Injincho itself. Let's move on to the other party members and characters within the story.
Okay.
Okay, my ass. Are you dragging us into another mess?
You're finally starting to understand me, Nurse Namba.
Over the course of YLAD's runtime, the player can recruit up to 6 additional characters, and these characters each have their own backstories and join Kasuga for their own reasons. The thing I enjoyed the most about these characters is the interactions they have with Kasuga and Injincho itself. Often while running around the sprawling cityscape, the player can encounter these little side events that happen around a familiar landscape or even while eating out at a restaurant. And these little side events give you insight into how the characters interact with each other, as well as what they think about Injincho itself. And oftentimes you'll get stories that you just don't get from any other source within the game. With all that said, the moments I enjoyed the most were the ones where Kasuga sat down one-on-one with each character and shared a drink. Here we get to dive a little bit deeper into each of the backstories of the characters, and we also get to see how they really think about Kasuga and why they joined him in his adventure.
Moron, I'm already involved. Real friends get in each other's shit.
Each time the player completes one of these one-on-one conversations, the relationship between the two goes a little bit deeper. And when it goes deeper, it essentially levels up as well. And for each level up, the player can unlock more jobs for that particular character. And in addition, they can unlock these tag team abilities, which are unique abilities between Kasuga and that character. From a gaming perspective, these additional storylines truly unlocked the full combat abilities of each individual party member and Kasuga. From a storyline perspective, it really cemented the relationships between the party itself and with Kasuga. And having these extra layers on top of the normal storyline beats kind of gives just that much more sincerity when you see them behave in certain ways throughout the main storyline.
Nah, I just order a drink from the bar, even if it meant going into debt.
You'd go into debt just for a drink?
Moving on to combat. Yakuza Like a Dragon is a significant departure for the Yakuza series. Gone are the normal action-based combat systems, and instead you're going to find a turn-based combat system, not unlike Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy. However, Yakuza Like a Dragon does not pull this system off as well as those two series. And just a little side note, Like a Dragon, Dragon Quest, get it? Okay. Anyways, running around Injincho, Kasuga will be able to spot enemies both in the field and on the minimap. And these characters kind of have a cone of observation, not unlike, say, Metal Gear Solid. And when Kasuga and team cross this cone, they have a very brief opportunity to get away, but if they fail to do so, then they will enter combat. I really like this setup. I always like it when RPGs give you the opportunity to avoid combat if you don't want to do it. And in this case, they do a really good job because you have all these different side streets and alleyways, so if you see a group of enemies as blocking your destination, 9 times out of 10, you can take a side route or go around in another way, and you can avoid the battle and go do what you want to do. This is especially useful when you're running fetch quests or you just want to do some mini games and take a break from the main storyline. While Sega may tout this game as being tactical, I really didn't find it to be that at all throughout my playthrough. It really was more akin to Final Fantasy X. You get to see a couple moves ahead, and you get to base your decisions on what the enemy's doing and what you're gonna do. Also, like FF10, players can be swapped in and out at will, even unconscious ones, if you find that the people you brought into your battle don't necessarily match with what the enemy is doing. As the battle progresses, enemies will shift and move throughout the battlefield, as will your party members, and this kind of opens up your line of attack for areas of effect, or there's a couple characters who do big like spinning moves that'll attack a group around them. I would say this is about as close as it gets to being tactical, in that you may decide to wait for the right moment for a group of enemies to clump up, and then you hit them with your all-out attack that hits a whole group of enemies. Is that necessarily tactical? I don't really consider it tactical. There's not as much advanced planning. You're mostly just reacting to a happenstance situation. As for the party makeup, you have actually quite a few choices. Initially, you will be stuck with your unique class that is associated with a certain party member. So Kasuga has the hero job, and Namba has homeless, etc. And these classes are really good, but as you level up, both in your relationship with other people in your party and just in general leveling up, you will unlock more jobs or classes that you can switch between. And having all these different jobs really kind of opens up the battle system a little bit, gives you more flexibility. Ranking up these jobs does unlock new skills and gives your character permanent stat boosts. And while the jobs do offer a lot of flexibility, as I mentioned, ranking them up is not the best system. And I do have a lot of issues with this job system, but we're not going to go into that right now. Let's put a pin in it. In addition to the skills associated with the job selected, Kasuga can also pull out his cell phone and call up a pound mate, which is just a different term for saying summon. Now, these pound mates come in and they will do damage to the enemy, buff your party, heal your party, or do status effects to your enemies. These are honestly some of the best parts of combat. They usually have hilarious introductions, the animations are extremely over the top. Kasuga's summoning animation is simultaneously classic summoning animations from, say, Final Fantasy X or Final Fantasy IX or whatever, but it's also, again, super over the top like Yakuza is known to do. These were just awesome attacks, awesome distractions for what may be going on, and I really enjoyed summoning them, even if I really had no reason to, just because I enjoyed watching them. And on that same note, pretty much all the attacks and skills used in the game are pretty flashy. They have great lighting effects, they're, again, appropriately over the top, especially the skills that are that are a little bit later, where they essentially get their own like big flashy animation or pre-rendered cutscene to go with them. All the flashiness really helps to make an otherwise kind of average RPG system into something that is at least slightly above average, if not for just the sheer entertainment value of it all. And I think that's a testament to just the art direction and the battle animations in general. To increase player engagement, the special attacks and skills do have associated button timings, both square and triangle. And while most of these were pretty easy, there were a few that were a little bit more on the tricky side. In addition to that, the player can press circle as they're getting attacked to increase their defense. If you time it just right, not only does your damage number go down, but if the attack maybe would have made the player get staggered, instead they aren't staggered and they stand their ground. While I really did enjoy the button timings, especially on the defensive end because it forced me to learn the enemy's attacks, I do think they left a lot on the table there. They could have done quite a bit more to get the player engaged, kind of like how Paper Mario or Indivisible, which I reviewed recently, constantly required the player's attention during battle. Lastly, there is a paper, rock, scissors component to the attacks and defense. Attacks can be associated with elements such as ice, fire, or lightning, and they also have a basic function such as magic, blunt, sharp, etc. Combining these two together against an enemy weakness will create a huge jump in damage. Conversely, if the opponent does the same thing to you where you have a weakness to some of these types, again, you're going to take a bunch of damage. So learning to master this system as well as the button timings and what jobs are going to be right for a particular situation, there's a surprising amount of depth there that maybe a player won't see at first glance. Overall, combat is serviceable, but ultimately unremarkable. You have your usual classes, tank, DPS, healer, and they perform their jobs well. But it's nothing I haven't seen before in another RPG. That's okay if I'm being honest, because this is Yakuza's first attempt at doing a turn-based RPG. You have to remember every game before in this series was action. It was an action-oriented game. So this is a big switch for the developer, and I have to give them props for how well they've done on their first try. Now, if Yakuza Like a Dragon 2 comes out and it is essentially the same, I would be disappointed. I would expect to see more complex mechanics, and again, if Sega is going to tout it as a tactical game, we need to see that. We need to see that it's actually a tactical game. I know I still need to pull that pin out for the job system, but I have two more things I want to talk about. Number one is the kick-ass battle music and music in general. When you get into a battle, especially a boss battle, this music will get you pumped. Let me play some of the tracks for you. And of course, any JRPG worth its salt has to have a victory fanfare, and Why Lads is pretty damn good. In general, the music throughout Yakuza Like a Dragon is excellent. It is seriously some good jams, and I can't recommend it enough. Number 2, before we pull that pin out, is gonna be just a recommendation actually. If you end up playing this game, I want you to be aware that the combat is very heavily dependent on the gear you have. The game doesn't necessarily place a ton of emphasis on gear. The tutorial for it is extremely short, and shops seem to just kind of carry random assortments of stuff, and as there's nothing really stopping you from going to, say, a really high level shop, and there's no way you're going to have enough money to buy it. So it's actually a little confusing about where to buy gear that's actually level appropriate. So to get around that, what I recommend doing is getting as heavily involved as you can in the crafting system. And what you should do is, once you find the workshop for this place, just keep investing in it over and over and over. Every time you get the opportunity, invest in it, get it leveled up, because what I ended up doing was just investing in that. And as I played, I would get the materials I need to upgrade things. And I pretty much never bought gear. I always had what I needed without really putting in that much effort, because I was just upgrading things as I went along. Getting these kind of high level pieces of gear early on, like I did, just because I focused on the crafting system, made a huge difference in my enjoyment in the game. So I do recommend putting as much effort as you can into that as you go along, and not wait to do all the crafting at the end, because it will feel like a slog. Okay, it's time to pull that pin out on the jobs. The jobs in Yakuza Like a Dragon are hampered by some bizarre design choices, but overall I do think it's an enjoyable system. However, I think that is going to be player dependent, and kind of how you play through the game, as well as what your tolerance level is for experimentation. Or, I mean, I guess you could always just look up a guide, and then you don't have to really worry about that at all. So to start off, all the jobs have really cool designs and interesting attacks, but the problem is the jobs are not very well defined. So when you see a new job unlocked, like say Hostess or Fortune Teller or Idol, what does that mean? What can the player expect out of unlocking a job like that? What do you associate with that job? And I think that's the major crutch to this system, is that it's hard to tell what a job is really designed for. So compare that to, say, something like a more traditional RPG would have. When you hear that you're going to have a class and it's called Knight or it's called Wizard, you expect certain things, right? The Wizard's going to run around casting spells. The Knight will maybe be kind of tanky with armor and a sword and shield. You don't expect the Wizard to run around with a giant broadsword. It's an archetype. You don't really expect it to deviate too much from that. The problem with the job system here is it doesn't clearly define what those are. And I honestly don't see a reason why that is, because Kasuga throughout the game has clearly stated several times that he enjoys Dragon Quest. And in fact, when you enter battles, your team and the people you end up fighting will change costumes into, monsters and your hero job classes. In reality, none of that is happening. That's all in Kasuga's head. So I don't see any reason why Kasuga couldn't, say, take the bodyguard class, and the description for it would be, it's like a samurai or something. At least give us something to identify it with. Yeah, does it use a katana? Okay, yes. So maybe we do get an idea of what that class does. But again, there's other ones like Fortune Teller or Idol, where you're not really entirely sure what that job class is going to do without investing some time in it. Now, some of you are going to say, well, just go into the menu and you can look up that job and you can see a list of all the skills that are in there. I understand that. You can go in there and see what all that does. And you can see the stat increases and all of that. But I think it's kind of ridiculous that the player would have to take that much time to do that. And additionally, it's really hard to compare one job to another. So there are several jobs that are, say, healers. You don't really know which is the most powerful or the best healer until you really get an opportunity to dig into that job and level it up some. I don't think that's good design. The game doesn't really tell you how powerful something is. A skill will say light, medium, or heavy, so you have kind of an idea of how strong it is, but you really don't know how strong it is because there's nothing to compare it to. Now, there's a couple skills that do a better job of this. So as an example, Kasuga has his different bat swings. And as you level him up in the hero class, you can see that the bat swings get better and better and better. So there's a degree of effectiveness that is clearly can be gauged. Much like, say, in Final Fantasy, you have your different levels of, Fire, Fira, Firaga, right? So you don't necessarily need to know exactly how much stronger it is, you just know that it's stronger than the one that came before it. But some classes don't have this at all. Like, every skill is named differently. So how do I know how effective that is? I don't know. The only way you know is testing. It's unfortunate because the jobs are really cool. It just requires way too much investment from the player to figure out how they work and which one is better than the other.
You serious right now?
On top of that, just real quick, the two female characters you can get in the game are really shortchanged in this. Their classes overall are pretty weak and primarily are support and healing. There's just a lot to say on that, right? It's pretty stereotypical, and I think they really missed out on an opportunity there. Now, the DLC does add the matriarch class, which is one of the best heavy damage dealing physical attack classes in the game, but that's a DLC. It's not part of the base game. So if you're just playing the base game, your female characters are just significantly weaker than their male counterparts. And I just think that's kind of unfortunate, not only just for, some equality's sake, but it's just unfortunate that two of your party members are just kind of automatically relegated to a secondary role because they don't really do that much compared to other classes.
Let's go! Let's do this!
Now, the last big thing I want to talk about regarding jobs, and then I swear I'm going to shut up about them, is going back to the relationships. Now, if you recall, when you level up the relationship, you also unlock more jobs and abilities for that party member. And I like this setup. I think it's actually pretty good. It reinforces the idea of friendship and trust within the group and with Kasuga. And I think it just really shows that if you invest the time into these characters, then you will get more out of them because they'll be willing to give Kasuga more of themselves to whatever cause or fight they happen to be tackling at that moment. So I think it works pretty well, and you're essentially leveling up on two different areas. However, I also know not everyone's going to follow through with every storyline to the end, and what that means is you automatically hamper your combat abilities. If you're in it, say, just for the battle system and you don't really care about the story at all, well, you're not going to reach kind of the pinnacle of the battle system because a lot of stuff will be locked off to you. I enjoy that kind of stuff. That is juice in my veins. I'm the type of person who, when they play a Final Fantasy game or Grandia or any other type of JRPG, I want to get the ultimate weapons. I want to find the best spells. I want to have the best armor. I want to do that stuff. That's the type of person I am. I enjoy kind of maxing out my party to where they can just steamroll any content in the game. And that's what I ended up doing with Yakuza Like a Dragon. I didn't do the absolute max I could have done, but I did enough to where I never had any issues while playing the game. Now, if you are not that type of person, you might not enjoy this system as much. You might not enjoy this combat as much. It's just something that is a matter of taste. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer for that. It's just a matter of, do you enjoy that type of gameplay or not? Saying all of that, it may make the game sound like it's super grindy, like you have to spend a significant amount of time leveling up and getting crafting materials and doing all that stuff. Depending how you play, the answer to that question will be yes or no. And I'm definitely going to touch on that in this next section. So let's go ahead and move into my next topic, everything else that Yakuza Like a Dragon has to offer.
Granny, try putting a little of this in your mouth before the signal changes.
Oh, now what is this? That's not kimchi, is it?
It is. And I know it may sound bonkers, but this stuff will light a fire under your ass, no doubt.
Ugh.
The Yakuza series does not mess around with minigames, and Yakuza Like a Dragon is no exception to this. There is a lot to do. I mean, just an absurd amount of things that you can do in this game. And because of that, I want to cover some of these side games or side quests that you can do. And I'm going to cover them in terms of relevancy, both from a gameplay perspective and what I just found fun. And then I'm also going to cover them in the sense of what I think is important. So even if it necessarily wasn't the best experience, it did help my overall progression within YLAD. The first minigame to become available to the player is the can collecting game. Kasuga gets on his bike and just starts trucking through a certain area, picking up cans as he goes along. Now, this game essentially plays like a weird version of Pac-Man, and that's not a bad thing. It's pretty fun. I enjoyed my time with it. I think the only thing that this game could have done better is more maps and better rewards that don't cost as much. There are some really cool things in there, but you have to play the game so much, and it's just not that engaging for that long. It's great while it lasts, but what the designers, I think, want you to do makes it overstay its welcome. So, yeah. YLAD has a fucking kart racer in it? Like a legit kart racer. It's got items in it, it's got boosts, it's got slides, you got different carts that you can upgrade with weight, acceleration, and speed. There are rival racers that challenge you on more difficult courses. It's kind of amazing how they crammed this into an entirely other game. Is it the best kart racer ever? No, definitely not. But it is more than competent enough to be worth playing. That's just my 2 cents on it. It's pretty awesome. I definitely recommend checking it out. And there are some good rewards. In fact, there's one reward in there that is required to get one of the ultimate weapons in the game. So yeah, it's good stuff. I really liked it.
Sorry to bother you boys. Yo, let's go.
Yes, goodbye.
Not so fast, Chief.
These are essentially side quests. I did probably 80 to 90% of them as I played through the game, and they're really good. The rewards from them vary quite a lot. It could be anything from money to experience to items. It's just kind of all over the place. The thing I like the most about them is they were very story focused for the most part. I mean, some of them weren't. Some of them were just straight up kind of weird fetch quests. But even those fetch quests had really good stories that went along with them. So yeah, sub-stories. I highly recommend doing them. Just go throughout your normal playthrough and complete sub-stories as they become available. It's just pretty good. Part-Time Hero is essentially a gigantic pool of battles, fetch quests, and stat tracking. So the battles are pretty self-explanatory. People will call into Part-Time Hero and they'll say, you know, I'm getting bullied, or this guy's trying to take my money, or whatever. You go to that spot, you fight the bad guys, you get your rewards, and you move on. I did absolutely every single one of those. Really liked them, thought they were great. The fetch quests are fetch quests. And then lastly is the stat tracking. So it's just more like milestones. So, you know, run a certain number of kilometers, or engage in a certain number of battles, beat a certain number of a certain type of enemy. Things that I didn't really have to seek out. They just kind of completed on their own. So yeah, Part-Time Hero, kind of hit or miss. I really liked the battle part of it, but the rest of it was just, I did it if it was easy to complete, and if I had to go out of my way, I didn't really bother. And it didn't seem to make a difference in my progression or how powerful my party got.
Here you go.
Ichiban Senbei! Whoa! Aren't you President Ichiban from Ichiban Confections?
I sure am.
Eat at Ichiban's Ichiban Senbei!
First in smiles, Ichiban Confections.
Okay, the business simulation is probably the one that most people have heard about outside of the Dragon Kart racing. I spent a ton of time in the business management simulation. It's really well done. Essentially, you take the Ichiban Confectionery Company from its very lowly rank in the stocks to eventually your goal is to reach #1 in the stock shareholders. So how you do that is you will purchase properties, and then you also hire or fire employees, and you'll assign the employees to these properties. And then you want to slowly upgrade the properties. And as time goes by, you'll be earning money as you go along, and eventually you'll hit the shareholders meeting. Then you go to the shareholders meeting, you assign employees who are there to defend the company against these shareholders, and then once you make it out the other side, then the cycle starts over again. What makes it kind of addictive is it has that one more turn aspect to it. If I do one more turn, I'll have enough money so I can buy this property. Or if I do one more term, I can finally afford to hire this guy that has been applying for a while. The other thing that's really nice about this particular minigame is it's integrated really well with the rest of the systems. So as you complete sub-stories, you'll find people will want to apply for your company because they saw what you did and you were a good person. So they're like, hey, I want to work for this guy. As you complete side quests, same thing. You may complete a certain minigame or whatever and find out, oh, the owner of that place wants to apply. You could be running around town and you'll just run into people who want to talk to you and offer you not only their services, but they may also say, oh, hey, I got a proposition for you. I heard you're the CEO of this company. It's kind of intertwined everywhere. And that's the thing that I really liked is as I progressed here, I was progressing in other areas of the game too. I will also say that it's the best moneymaker in the game. It's super fast to earn money once you're at the top level. And that was kind of how I grinded for money is I would just spend like 5 or 10 minutes doing that. I'd have tons of money and then I'd go and continue my story. The only other thing I will say about it is I definitely recommend doing as much of it as you can as you go along instead of saving it all at once. If you do it all at once, it might seem overwhelming. And on top of that, doing this side minigame does go towards unlocking a character. I won't say who or anything like that, but just be aware that if you neglect this minigame, you miss out on an optional combat character. Just a little hint from me. There are a ton of other activities, so I'm just going to list them off really quick and not do a bunch of descriptions about them. Batting cages, top golf, darts, trying to stay awake while watching a movie, collecting Tojo Clan coins, Sotenberry Battle Arena, Millennium Tower Dungeon, taking pictures, finding cats, crafting weapons, completing the Suji decks, hooking up with ladies, karaoke, and more. Now, you might be asking yourself, why did I just spend so much time going over the minigames and side quests? Good question, my imaginary viewer. Let me tell you. To start off, I wanted to showcase just how much the player can do in Yakuza Like a Dragon. It's truly mind-boggling what is available for the player to do. And I wanted to state this because it is one of the reasons I played YLAD for as long as I did. If I ever got bored doing one activity, I could easily transfer over to another and my boredom was alleviated. As an example, I mentioned how the dungeons were pretty dull because it relied heavily on the battle system to provide the enjoyment. So what I would often do is go and do a dungeon, and then when I did that dungeon, I would then go find another side quest to do. So that may be Dragon Kart racing or the business simulation. I would do that for a while, then go do another dungeon. Go do something else, go do another dungeon. It just kept things fresh, so I never felt like I was wasting a bunch of time doing one thing over and over and over and over. Honestly, that's a problem that a lot of RPGs have. They rely on the grind, they rely on the loot system, or whatever it may be to provide the enjoyment instead of providing more and separate activities the player can do. Another reason I wanted to talk about all this is in preparation for my own review, I watched a lot of other reviews regarding YLAD. And a common theme that I saw in quite a few of them was that the reviewer would hit a wall at a certain point in the game, kind of towards, I would say, the latter third to latter quarter of the game, where their party was severely underleveled for what was coming. And what they had to do was essentially grind for like a dozen hours, and then they could finish the game.
Hey, dude, have you lost it?
And a lot of people said that was poor pacing on, Sega's behalf. A lot of people just blamed that's the nature of JRPGs. Everybody had their own explanations for why the game was set up that way. For me, I didn't run into that at all. I mean, at all. Not once in the game did I find myself underleveled, except actually towards the beginning of the game when I was still trying to figure out kind of how I should approach something like YLAD. And I think that's will greatly increase or decrease your enjoyment of the game is honestly how you play it. So if you're the type of person who blazes through the main story, you're in trouble. You are going to hit a wall and you will be forced to do side quests and grind. That's just how the game's set up. That's going to happen. For me, in total, it probably took me about 70 hours to get to the end of the story. And then I played another like 10 or 12 hours after that, just doing some other quests that I just wanted to do. Again, I never run into a situation where I felt underleveled and that I was hitting a wall. In fact, most of the time I felt the difficulty of the game was pretty low. What does all of this have to do with the side quests? Well, I did side quests as they came available. My play would kind of look like this. I would do a story beat and then I'd check the map. The map would open up, it'd have some icons of some things I could do, part-time heroes opened up, here's a sub-story that's opened up, and then I'd go do those. Maybe not all of them, but I'd do a good chunk of them. And I just kind of kept repeating that. So by the time I did get to the end, I was slightly over-leveled for where I needed to be. That's honestly not how I normally play games, but for some reason, with all the variety of activities I could do, I just wanted to play that way. I wanted to explore all these things as they came along. I didn't want to do all of that at the end. Going along with that, you have to remember, Yakuza Like a Dragon is trying to be a Yakuza version of Dragon Quest. So heading into the game, my immediate thought was, how do you play Dragon Quest? Well, Dragon Quest is designed to be played in short bursts. You play 30 minutes here or there, you play maybe a couple hours over the weekend, but you're never really doing a huge, massive session. You're never really playing for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time. That's not to say people don't play that way, because people definitely do, but Dragon Quest is designed to be played in these small chunks. So that's kind of how I approached YLAD. I played it in small chunks. It was something I did, before I went to bed. It was just comfort food. I got my opportunity to play this game before I went to bed for just like 30 minutes, maybe an hour, and then I go to sleep. I really liked that. It was just a routine that I could follow and a rhythm. And I think the benefit of playing the game kind of like this is there's always something to do. There's so many different activities that even if you only play for like an hour or even 2 hours, maybe an hour of that you're playing Dragon Kart Racer, and then the other hour you're doing side quests, you're doing sub-stories. And then the next time you play, you do an hour of the business simulation and then an hour of the main story. And it can just loop like that. It was really nice to have this game to where there was all this variety all the time. And it was designed to be that way. So again, I bring up all the side quests because I have seen comments that people say, oh, you hit a wall and then it gets really grindy. I never had to grind because if you're completing all these quests as you go along, you're going to be fine. Your characters will be leveled, your relationships will be where they need to be, your jobs will be unlocked. You're just not going to have to worry about that stuff. I feel it's important to state because if you are the kind of person who the thought of doing a 70-hour game is daunting and no thank you, I will never touch this game, and that's kind of what I thought and I just gave it a chance anyways, don't think of it like that. Think of it as just tiny little chunks.
나도 사랑해.
First off, I want to say if you've made it this far, thank you so much for sticking around. And I really hope you enjoyed this in-depth review of Yakuza Like a Dragon. As I stated in my intro, YLAD is one of my favorite games of the last 5 years. The characters involved are fantastic. The story really gripped me from beginning to end, including all the different twists and turns that it took, and all the different activities that were available made sure that I never was bored as I went along this frankly pretty long journey. Out of everything I've said in this review, I hope the one thing you take away from this is just how positive an experience Yakuza Like a Dragon really is. With everything going on in the world, it's pretty easy to feel down. It's pretty easy to get caught up in negativity. This game kind of came out of nowhere for me and really was just a bundle of positivity. Yes, there are some bad things that happen in the game. Yes, there are some moments that will definitely make you feel depressed, but overall, the good guys in this game, you know, Kasuga, Adachi, Namba, Psycho, all these people, they really embody the spirit of helping others and staying true to your word, staying true to yourself. And I think that's a really good message with everything that's going on in this world. It was something that I really looked forward to every night, as I stated before I went to bed. It was just something I did. It was a routine, and it was nice to visit these characters. It was a comfort when, no matter what else was going on in my day, I could sit down and enjoy my time with it. And I know a lot of games provide that sense of enjoyment, but this game in particular, with its characters, really takes that and elevates it above some other games. You're not just enjoying the gameplay, you're enjoying spending time with these positive characters. Like I said, I really hope that's the big takeaway you get from this. So even if the turn-based mechanics are not your thing, even if all the activities are not your thing, I hope these characters will at least touch you. I hope these storylines will reach you in a good way and will make you want to continue to play the game. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed yourself as much as I enjoyed putting this video together for Yakuza Like a Dragon. Have yourself a good one.
Granny, try putting a little of this in your mouth before the signal changes.
Ooh.